Welcome to KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM, The Joe Miller Show. This show is made possible by the McPherson Group Tax Defense Attorneys, 1-800-BEAT-IRS, B-E-A-T, IRS, rescuing Americans from IRS tyranny. We've got a great show lined up for you today. First up, Rebecca Kiessling, friend of mine, international pro-life speaker. She's an attorney, conceived in rape. She started a number of organizations, including one of the most prominent, Save the One, also Hope After Rape. Rebecca Kiessling has been very active in the pro-life movement, very decisive in changing minds on the issue of conceived in rape. Typically, there are exceptions carved out in all sorts of so-called pro-life abortion laws for rape and incest, and she's here to talk to us about why that's the wrong approach. Rebecca, thanks for taking the time to be on our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we've got a little bit of a delay, but we'll work with that. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, at least initially, is kind of the state of the laws across the nation. Maybe you can give our audience an update on how there have been inroads made on the issue of those conceived in rape and the protections that are afforded. So think about that for just a minute. But before we actually get into that, there are probably a number of people that are listening in our listening audience that have never heard of Rebecca Kiessling, have never heard your story. Could you kind of give our audience a brief overview of what brought you to the realization that those that are conceived in rape have lives worth living and should be protected just as much as anybody else for that matter?
Sure. Well, I was conceived in rape. I learned when I was 18 how I was conceived, met my birth mother at 19. She was abducted at knife point by a serial rapist, and she actually went to 2 back alley illegal abortionists, and I was almost aborted. And even though she was so happy to meet me, she told me that if abortion had been legal, she would have aborted me, even if she had to do it all over again when I asked her. And she maintained, her pro-choice position for the first 6 years of knowing her. And then she changed her mind. And the beautiful thing is she got to enjoy a relationship with me. I know a lot of women who changed their minds, and, tragically, it's too late to have a relationship, because the baby's dead. And so now today, my birth mother and I are both thankful that we were both protected from the abortion. And so she didn't choose life for me. She chose abortion. Pro-life leaders, legislators, voters chose life for me. And I owe my birth to the law being there to protect me. And so it's out of that gratitude that I seek to do the same for others, because I don't feel like there's, anything extra special, about me that, I deserved it and millions of others didn't.
You've had a tremendously positive impact. I mean, the Last Correct to Life has had you up to speak. Of course, I've heard you several times, not just up here, but also in the lower 48. Very articulate, very convincing. You didn't have to convince me, though. I've been with you for a long time on this issue. But as far as others in political leadership, you've had a real impact on the way of thinking of actually some presidential candidates in the past, right?
Yeah, two. Governor Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich. I had backstage passes to the premiere of the Citizens United film, The Gift of Life, with Governor Mike Huckabee, because I'm in the film. And 4 presidential candidates spoke, and both of them were there. So I had one-on-one conversations with them, and they both changed their minds after talking to me that night.
Well, tell us a little bit about the conversation between you and Governor Perry. I mean, I found that very compelling when you described it to me earlier.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing because, he told me right then and there to my face that he vowed no more exceptions, no more rape exceptions. And he kept his vow ever since. Basically, I told him that I'm in tonight's film, gave him my DVDs, Conceived in Rape from Worthless to Priceless, Accepting Cases of Rape, 12 Stories of Survival, gave him my business card, and he was stunned. And he asked me, this is your story? And I shared with him what I just shared with all of you. And then and he asked me, can I have your autograph? And I said, no. And he said, I know, I mean it. And he gave me a marker and said, here, make it out to my daughter. So I wrote 100% pro-life, Rebecca Kiessling. And then he asked me more questions, and I told him about the speaking that I do about 75 times a year around the country, overseas. As an attorney, I litigated numerous high-profile cases defending human life. I now mentor others with stories like me. We have a database of hundreds now. and a couple dozen national speakers to save the one. And then he said to me, you're my heroine. I said, wow, thank you. But it's funny you say that, because my question for you is, would you be my hero? And he said, yes, I would. And I just told him, but you make that rape exception. And he put his head down. He was shaking his head. He said, this is so powerful. This is so powerful. And he was thinking about it. I explained to him that, what I explained to you, that I'm alive today because of leaders who are my heroes. Would you be my hero too? And then we took some pictures, and he just kept looking at the picture, saying, I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine. And I looked up at him and explained that when you make that rape exception, that's like saying to me that I deserved the death penalty for the crimes of my father. The U.S. Supreme Court said that he didn't even deserve the death penalty. There's no death penalty for rapists, and that even for child molesters,
right.
They said that it's cruel and unusual punishment, and he was nodding his head. And then I asked him, but you believe that I, the innocent child, deserve the death penalty? And he said, no, I don't. And I'm like, oh, well, and he stopped me. And he said, tonight's event and this film are supposed to be all about changing hearts and minds. And right now, you're changing my heart. And I thought, changing? What does that mean? And
you're a politician.
Yeah, and I had so many friends on Facebook telling me that they were praying for me, saying, you're going to have an Esther moment. I just know it for such a time as this. And I was not about to miss it. So I challenged him, no more rape exceptions. And he looked me in the eyes, and he promised no more rape exceptions. And he went on to say that he had never put a face to the issue before. He had never considered it from the perspective of someone like me. He's the governor of Texas running for president. He's never heard the arguments. But it goes to show what stories, faces, voices can do to pierce the heart in ways in which arguments cannot. And
well, it's part of the movement forward that I think is really changing hearts and minds. I mean, you can see in the polling data, for example, that the youth particularly are moving toward the pro-life cause. And so hearts, I think, are increasingly open, which is unusual. I mean, you look in these other areas in culture, and it seems like we're just losing on all sides of the culture war. But here, education's been very effective. Now, you've actually gone around to college campuses and argued, debated this issue, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, and we've only got a couple of minutes left in this segment, so we may have to take this up after the messages, but at some point, you actually confront people that say straight up to you, you don't have the right to exist.
Yeah, if I had my way, you'd be dead right now. And I've actually I explained that that's what it means. And I've actually had someone raise their hand and say, yeah, I just want to say that I have no problem looking in the eyes and saying to you that I think that your mother should have been able to abort you. And I fully understand that would mean that you'd be dead right now. Yeah, I have no problem doing that. Wow. Okay, well, this is out of their care for women, Joe, that they would say such a thing to a woman like me. I'm not feeling the love.
Yeah, it shows transparently the evil that motivates that thinking, and it reflects also, of course, the complete illogic in position. We're going to talk more about that and also some of the other major changes that are taking place through legislation. They're moving forward the pro-life cause. We'll talk more with Rebecca Kiessling about that and more after these messages. Stay with us, The Joe Miller Show. Welcome back to KOAN Hot Talk, 1080 AM, 95.1 FM, The Joe Miller Show. We're honored to have with us Rebecca Kiessling, international pro-life speaker, attorney, a very effective advocate for life, especially those conceived in rape. She has started the Save the One Foundation. She also has started Hope After Rape Conception. She's been very impactful in the political realm. Talked about last segment, convincing Governor Rick Perry in the 2012 election cycle to change his position on whether or not abortion is justified for those conceived in rape. She's been very effective also with others, including Newt Gingrich. Rebecca, thank you for staying with us.
Thank you so much.
So we were talking during the break about some of the changes that have happened legislatively across the country, and there are efforts all across the country to continue the pro-life march. There have been a number of dismemberment bills that have passed the legislatures that are being considered currently. Can you kind of give us an overview of what you've seen over the last several months and tell us the bright spots and the not so bright spots that are out there as far as this type of legislation goes?
Yeah, over a year ago, there was actually research done on the pro-choice side that showed that I think it was around 85% of laws introduced, pro-life legislation had no rape exception across the state at the state level. And then I think it was like 77% were passed with no rape exceptions. And so, like, the good news at the state level, we're doing better than ever. But at the federal level, it's actually become standard to have the rape exception. And I remember when the stupid Stupak Amendment, that's how I always remember what it's called because it's so stupid. Unfortunately, Stupak was from my home state of Michigan, too. But, you know, that's how we got Obamacare, is because there was this agreement that Obama would have an executive order that would say there would only be abortions, you know, in cases of rape, incest, life of the mother. And what was initially reported from pro-life movement, from the leaders, was that, there would be no rape, no abortions. And then it's like, I pointed out, wait a second, there's abortions in this. They had rape, incest, you know, in this. And they said, well, that merely incorporates the terms of Hyde. Like, okay, so a generation ago, we settled this. We threw them under the bus a generation ago, so this is already settled.
Right.
You know, they're expendable. Why are you arguing the point, you know? So it was exasperating. And, of course, we knew that opened the door for all abortion, funding all of abortion.
Sure
and that's what happened. It just happened again in Korea. There was an article just this week. 17-year-old girl died. And what happened is they had a rape exception in South Korea. And the doctor convinced this girl's mother to consent to the abortion, saying that the child was going to have Down syndrome, and then falsified the health records to say she was raped, which that's all you need. If you have a rape exception, you know, even when they try to have a reporting requirement, like they did in Congress recently on the late-term abortion ban, they had this reporting requirement. And, well, it wasn't really a reporting requirement. It didn't say that the woman had to report it. It just said it had to be reported. And so that means the abortion clinic worker could call it in. It didn't say it had to be in writing. It didn't say it had to be in person, none of that. So an abortion clinic worker could just call in a report for rape, no requirement of follow-up, no due process, nothing. Just say it's rape. That's it. And, you know, I don't know if you recall this, but 5 Republican women killed the bill because they were objecting to this liberal reporting requirement. And, I mean, it's just so ridiculous because everybody knows that opens the door for abortion on demand for any reason. So you're not even going to save any lives because they just have to say it's rape. Just like Norma McCorvey lied in Roe v. Wade. She was told
it's not only that.
Rape.
It's also the logic of it, though. I mean, if you sit back and you say, okay, the independent life that's formed, that's conceived, in certain circumstances can forfeit that life, then there's no limits. I mean, it's a breakdown of logic to say that on the one hand, a child should be preserved, should be protected, and on the other hand, it's not because of the conception methodology. There is no sense to it, and it opens the door more than just in the malpractice that occur in the lies and the fraud that occur in order to allow, you know, these exceptions to go forward in a much broader sense than what, you know, the legislators actually describe them as when they propose them. But it's the whole logic of it. And if you are consistently pro-life, you say that this is an independent life, It has the same sort of protections that anybody else has. Obviously, without the due process of law, there cannot be, and without the other processes that are guaranteed by the Constitution, there can't be any deprivation of life. So I appreciate what you're doing, because I think it raises that illogic for everybody to see. But not only that, by your presence and by the presence of others that are part of your group, people have to confront it, and it's very uncomfortable. Even though you have had some confrontations on college campuses that suggest that some people are willing to actually look you in the eye and say you don't have any right to exist. The reality is most people don't react that way, do they?
No, and the thing is, it's not just that I wouldn't exist, because I do have people say, well, if your birth mother hadn't been raped, you wouldn't be here today either. So does that mean that you're pro-rape? They actually say that to me. And I explain that there's a difference, because I did exist. It's not my right to have been created. I did exist. It's my right not to have been killed. And that's the thing. I would have been killed through a brutal abortion. And just because I don't look the same as I did when I was 4 years old or 4 days old, unborn in my mother's womb, that doesn't mean that wasn't me. That was still me. And some people say, well, it wouldn't have been you. Well, who would it have been? You ask students, well, how many of you have ultrasound photos in your baby album? Most do nowadays. And what do your parents say to you? I don't really know what that is. I don't even know what it's doing there. It's some kind of glob of tissue. No, they say that was, and the students finish the sentence. They say that was you. And the students understand that. They understand the causal connect. That was me. And when it comes to this issue of abortion,
and that's one of the reasons.
I don't really know what that is.
Well, that's one of the reasons why there are attitudes changing significantly on this issue, because of that type of technology. And people, when they confront it, unless you're just willfully ignorant on the issue, you've got to say, okay, maybe I got to change my thinking on this issue. Now, you are obviously out there, not just with respect to Save the One, but also with Hope After Rape Conception, out there working effectively to change attitudes on this issue. You were recently on Cardinal Dolan's radio show. What happened in that interchange? Tell our audience a little bit about that conversation.
Well, that was pretty awesome, because I'm really frustrated with a lot of pro-life leaders who, I don't know if you realize this, but in the Catholic community, they use something called Evangelium Vitae 73 as justification for compromising on the rape exception. And what that encyclical from the Catholic Church says is that, a Catholic politician can support imperfect legislation if it has the end of reducing abortions. Okay, but if you look at a whole at Evangelium Vitae, it's no exceptions, no exceptions, no exceptions. But then it says they can support an imperfect bill if it will reduce abortions, and it has to be a deciding vote. But that's only for legislators, and it's only if it's a deciding vote. It's not for pro-life leaders, But even still, what I argue is that this does not, he wasn't talking about rape exceptions. When he was talking about imperfect legislation, he was talking about reducing abortions, maybe parental consent, informed consent, regulating abortion clinics, things that would reduce abortion even though it doesn't outright ban it altogether like we want. But he wasn't talking, that wasn't authorizing discrimination. And what I explained to Cardinal Dolan is, and I've explained to other people, is that, so you're going to tell me in a nation like Lebanon, where there's a large population of Catholics, or, larger, right? But it's primarily Muslim. You're going to tell me that a Catholic legislator could support an abortion ban that had the exception in cases of Catholic babies? It would have the effect of reducing the number of abortions. It's imperfect.
Right,
You're telling me that the Pope meant to say that this would be okay for him to do that. And you know what Cardinal Dolan said? He said, preposterous. Preposterous. And he also made the point, as we were talking about the pain-capable bill, he said he had actually read my 43-page essay. I was shocked.
Rebecca, we're going to have to wrap it. We're going to have to wrap it up. I apologize. We're hitting a close break here,
no
a hard break for messages. But really appreciate having you on. Again, RebeccaKiessling.com, conceived in rape. Get her story. It'll make a difference. Stay with us. The Joe Miller Show. We'll be back with you after these messages.